Good evening. I am William Anthony Hay. I'm the Associate Director for the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership here at Arizona State University. I run our public programs, and I'm very glad you could join us for another lecture in the Civic Discourse Project. Our focus this year is America at 250, the semi-quincentennial of American independence with 2026. This is the school's 9th year organizing the Civic Discourse Project for Arizona State University and the wider Phoenix and Arizona community. You can explore video archives of our speaker events and some webinars on SCETL's YouTube channel and on our ASU website. And that includes all of the programs over the past 9 years. From 2017 onward, we started out as a line in the budget, in the state budget, and a concept, and we've grown into a thriving program with civic outreach, civic education, and an academic program. We've worked for 9 years to convene a high-level conversation with the Civic Discourse program. And these public events are an extension of SCETL's academic program. The courses, the curriculum, the degrees, and student experiences that we strive to connect liberal arts with civic education. We're the Civics School for Arizona State University. I want to strike a note on mention something that I really would rather not be discussing, and that's security. And I'd like to thank everybody for cooperating and going along with our security measures for today's program with Scott Jennings. Recent events are a painful reminder that open dialogue and different perspectives aren't always welcome. SCETL is committing to upholding free speech, free association, and we do that in our actions as well as in our words. We try and provide alternative perspectives. Gathering together, I think, is as much a lesson in civics as the substance of our conversation, in some ways as many of our academic offerings. People gathering together as part of a community to discuss, to learn, to communicate, to debate. That seems like common sense, but as the cliche holds, common sense is a very uncommon thing. That point brings us to our speaker today. Scott Jennings is a nationally known commentator for CNN and for the Salem Radio Network. He hosts a weekly podcast, Flyover Country with Scott Jennings, a Kentucky native and founding partner of Run Switch consulting firm. He's worked on 4 presidential campaigns and numerous state, local, and congressional elections. This gives a sense of traveling all across our great country. He served as a special assistant and then congressional liaison in the George W. Bush administration. Working in Washington and travel across the United States gives him a valuable perspective on trends, including the populist wave since 2026. Scott's forthcoming book, entitled A Revolution of Common Sense, appears next month, so order early for prompt delivery. I'm delighted to welcome Scott Jennings on A Revolution of Common Sense, Understanding America's Populist Moment.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. It's an honor to be with you all tonight, and it's an honor to be out of the TV studio, honestly, and to be out here in Arizona with all of you. How many people in here watch CNN? Just a brief show of hands, yeah? Oh my goodness. How did you gather up our entire viewership in one auditorium? Miracle. Thank you all very much. I'm doing what I can, folks. But it is fun to be here at Arizona State. I'm not used to getting applause when I get introduced. It's normally 4 or 5 people yelling at me at the same time, so it's an amazing reprieve. You all saw on the screen, I do have a book coming out, as was mentioned, and I do hope you buy it. It comes out November the 18th. It's called A Revolution of Common Sense. And I had an idea in February that, as I told the president when I went to see him in the Oval Office, I thought that last year he had revolutionized political campaigning. I'm going to talk a little bit about his return to power tonight. And I also told him that I thought he was on the brink of revolutionizing governing. Whether you like it or you don't like it, love it or hate it, or just ambivalent, which I find unlikely in our political climate, there's no doubt that he has revolutionized the modern presidency, from campaigns to exercising executive authority. I told him I thought somebody should write a book about this. So I hadn't been in the Oval Office actually since 2008, when I last was in there with President George W. Bush, whom I served in his second term and in both of his campaigns. So I called over and asked to see the president. I was under the impression I was meeting with the president. Went to the Oval Office, opened the door, and in fact, I was meeting with the entire cabinet. And I walked in. It was the middle of the day. It was a very, very unseasonably warm day. It was just 2 weeks after he had taken office. And I walked into the Oval Office, stepped one foot inside, and he looked up from the Resolute desk. The whole cabinet's gathered around. And he looked at me and he goes, and we don't know each other, mind you, really, that well. You look terrific. I mean, you look good on TV, but you actually look terrific. Have a seat next to the other Scott. Besson, the Treasury Secretary. There's 2 Scotts in his life. And so I plopped down on the couch there. I'd sat on that couch many times serving President Bush. And I sat down on the couch and I thought, okay, I'll wait my turn here, you know. Immediately, I was inserted. Does everybody here know Scott? He's like our best guy. He knows how to go right up to the line without getting fired, which is no small thing. Scott, tell Marco what you would do about the Panama Canal. If you have $30, you can read the rest. I promise you, you don't want to miss the story. But I sat there for 2 hours and pitched the president on this book. And I told him I thought the rebranding of the Republican Party as a party of common sense was one of the most genius modern political strategic moves I'd ever heard. He had just said that in his inaugural address. And when you look at his coalition, it attracted so many people who were non-political, people who hadn't voted before or rarely voted, people who hadn't thought of themselves as Republicans, people who hadn't really been engaged with or interested in any political party or political candidate for quite some time, if ever. He had people from the left. He had people from the right. He had an ideologically diverse coalition. But when you don't brand yourself in rigid ideological terms, and you brand yourself with something like common sense, it's an attractive thing. And so we talked about that day. I spent some time with the president for the book. I interviewed the cabinet. I interviewed Elon Musk just prior to his departure from the White House. So we have some stories in there about that. But I think you'll like it. It comes out, you can order it now. It comes out on November the 18th. And if you have Donald Trump fans in your life, you can put it under the Christmas tree. And if you have Donald Trump haters in your life, you can also put it under the Christmas tree. And in both cases, you'll be quite happy with the reaction. So, I'll just stand here now while you order it. Go ahead. So, it means something to me to be on a college campus today. And I go to a lot of campuses. I do every year. But especially today, because just over a month ago, we lost Charlie. And it was on a campus not so different from this one. He was doing what he loved, which was sitting at a table and talking with students and trying to prove that young people actually want debates and that they want civil discourse. He was modeling civil discourse. He was doing what we always say that we should do. Talk to each other. Listen to each other. That's how we solve our problems in a democracy. Charlie was doing that. Whether you agreed with him or disagreed with him or agreed with him 80% of the time or 10% of the time, he was modeling civil discourse. And for that, he was shot. He understood something in politics that most people miss. The real action is not in Washington, D.C. It's not in the green rooms at CNN where I spend way too much time. It's right here on campuses like Arizona State, where the next generation is figuring out what kind of America, what kind of Arizona they want to build for their own future. I met with your president today, President Crow. I was extremely impressed with what he's building here at Arizona State. You have a president who talks a lot about American exceptionalism. It's a great term. Every university president should be talking about it. And that's what Charlie talked about. I saw Charlie about 2 weeks before he died. He had invited me to Colorado to a Turning Point event, and he and I did a conversation in front of some of his supporters. And we talked a lot about the future of Western civilization. And Charlie was as full of ideas and excitement that night. He'd had a long week, but we had a really engaging conversation. And I walked away from that conversation that night in Colorado thinking, I'm so hopeful. All he was talking about actually wasn't college campuses. It was the high schools and the number of chapters that they were starting in high schools and the amount of interest they were getting from teenagers. I mean, most teenagers are planning, how to get around the gate at the next party. And here's Charlie organizing them and attracting them to American politics, an engaged electorate among a group of people that we often think are disengaged. I left there so hopeful. And then 2 weeks later, I was on the air on my Salem show when I had to report the news that Charlie had been shot. And a few minutes later, I had to drive over to CNN and report the news that Charlie had died. And so I lived through it with my audience, and I'm sure like many of you went through a range of emotion about it, and we continue to work through it together as a country. I'm not sure anything like this has happened in my lifetime, an individual political assassination like this that has so touched and moved so many people. It'll be interesting to see the continued outgrowth from what happened to Charlie. Charlie believed that universities were at their best, and universities at their best are exactly what they claim to be, places where we test ideas, challenge assumptions, search for the truth. And that's why I'm here tonight, not to give you talking points, but to think through together how we arrived at this extraordinary moment in our politics. I'll start with the elephant in the room. Almost nobody predicted what was going to happen in the 2024 election. A year out from the election, the president was polling in the high 30s. The smart money, the really smart money, had written him off. The betting markets had given him a long shot. The entire Republican consultant class was planning for AT after Trump. Go back to 2021 and 2022. How many people in here could put up your hand and truly say you were 100% sure Donald Trump was returning to the White House? Probably very few. But then what happened? He won the national popular vote by 1.5 points. He won it by about 2.5 million votes. He carried Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, all the swing states. He made major gains with Hispanic voters, young voters, working class voters of all backgrounds, all races, all ages. In his 3 elections, we have about 3,100 counties in this country. In his 3 elections, in about 1,500 of those counties, Trump improved the Republican vote share in each of the 3. Half of America, he's improving his party's vote share. Democrats improve their party's vote share in just 57 counties. 1,500 going one way, 57 going the other, and those 57 are almost uniformly the wealthiest, most elite counties in the United States. Here is the question that we are wrestling with. How did the most analyzed, most polled, most studied electorate in human history do something that virtually no expert saw coming? I've been in politics since 2000. Here's what I've learned. When the entire establishment gets blindsided, and Lord knows I've been in it and I've been part of the blind, it's not because the voters are irrational. It's because the establishment has stopped listening to them. You think about it. Our political and media institutions have become incredibly insular. Newsrooms that used to be spread across the entire United States are now concentrated in just a handful of major American cities. The people explaining America to itself increasingly live in the same places. They went to the same schools. They talk only to each other. They hire each other. They marry each other. And without meaning to, they have created an echo chamber that calls itself expertise. And in the media business, increasingly, they all have the same politics. University of Syracuse studied this recently. very, 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 very small percentage of people who would consider themselves to be Republican or conservative go into the media. Vast majority of media employees consider themselves to be Democrats or liberal. This is what we mean when we say the term elite failure. Not that elites are stupid, they're not. And it's not that they're not well-meaning. Many are. It's just that they've lost connection with the very people that they claim to represent, the very people whom have entrusted them with leadership of our national institutions. Let me give you some examples of what I think was extreme institutional failure. Remember the China shock? Economists promised that free trade with China would create jobs. But between 2000 and 2010, we lost about 5.8 million manufacturing jobs. Researchers later discovered that increased trade with China cost us about 1.5 to 2 million of those jobs. Communities that had thrived for generations were hollowed out and left for dead. Almost overnight, to be honest. The 2008 financial crisis. 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed, top officials said the subprime crisis was, quote, contained. We then experienced the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression. COVID school closures. Many European countries reopened their schools by May of 2020. This started in the winter. By May, they were open. We in America kept many schools closed through 2021. The result, the largest learning loss in American history. Math, reading, and science scores have dropped to levels unseen for decades, and they have yet to recover. And there was a social cost. Child abuse, drug abuse, suicide rates, all on the rise. It's a lost generation. I could go on, one after another in COVID alone. There was so much failure. Each time and in each of these examples, it was the same pattern. Experts assured the American people they had it under control. They knew what was best. But reality then proved otherwise. And nobody is ever held accountable. And then they wonder, why does trust collapse in our institutions? This is not the first time that America has suffered a populist uprising due to collapsing trust in institutions. In the 1890s, we saw something remarkably similar. Back then, farmers were getting crushed by railroad monopolies and bank policies. The political establishment in both parties seemed captured by wealthy interests. Sound familiar? William Jennings Bryan, no relation, emerged as the voice of the common man, railing against the cross of gold on which elites were crucifying ordinary Americans. Bryan lost. He ran many times and lost every time. But the movement that he represented transformed American politics. Within 20 years, we had antitrust laws, direct election of senators, women's suffrage. The populist moment, despite not electing a candidate, did force institutional change. And here's what was interesting. The issues were different, but the dynamic was the same. Regular people felt locked out of their own democracy. They believed the system was rigged for insiders. They were hungry for someone, anyone, of any political party, of any stripe, who would acknowledge their concerns instead of explaining to them that they were wrong to have them. Or worse, stupid to have them. If we're looking for the moment, though, I think in modern history when everything changed. In our era, it was COVID. The pandemic exposed every institutional failure at once. Who in here remembers 15 days to slow the spread? Yeah, we're still in it. It became 2 years of rolling restrictions. Small businesses were forced to close while big box stores stayed open. I'll never understand how COVID was going to spread on Main Street, but not in Walmart. Churches were shuttered while casinos and liquor stores ran wide open. Kids could not go to school, but politicians' kids somehow got their in-person instruction. The governor of California was able to eat at a restaurant called the French Laundry while you all were eating at home. During COVID, American billionaires increased their wealth dramatically while hundreds of thousands of small businesses closed permanently. We witnessed one of the largest upward transfers of wealth in American history. All the while we were being told we're in this together. And when people, regular people, questioned this, any of it, when they asked about trade-offs, when they asked about cost versus benefit, whether the cure might be worse than the disease, what happened? They were banned from social media. They were ostracized and called grandma killers. They were fired from their jobs. Scores of military men and women, firefighters, first responders, were fired from their jobs. And I think that is when something snapped. People realized that follow the science actually meant follow the politics. That expert opinion meant shut up and comply. That the rules only applied to them and not the people making our rules. And this is where Donald Trump comes back into the picture, along with Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, and yes, our friend Charlie. What connects these very different figures? They all refused to play by the establishment's rules. When Twitter banned Trump, he started his own platform. When Spotify tried to censor Rogan, he said publish the whole thing or publish nothing. When universities would not host conservative speakers, Charlie Kirk just set up a folding table on a sidewalk. They all understood something crucial. In the age of the internet, you don't need institutional permission to have or use your voice. You just need something true and the courage to say it. Trump in particular became a vessel for every American who'd been told to sit down and shut up. Was he crude? Sometimes. Did he violate every presidential behavioral norm? Daily. And I don't mean that as a pejorative. But that is precisely why millions of people loved him. He made millions of Americans feel that there was a president or a presidential candidate that was speaking the way they would speak if someone ever bothered to hand them a microphone. Let's look at the coalition that delivered Trump back to the White House in 2024. The shifts are remarkable. Trump made significant gains with Hispanic voters. Big moves from 2020 to 2024. He improved dramatically with young men, including young Black and Hispanic men. He won working class voters by substantial margins, while Democrats increasingly became the party of college-educated professionals and the super wealthy and the super elite. This is the great political realignment of our time. It's about class. It's about whether you trust the system or you think it's rigged and needs reform. It's about whether you believe the experts sight unseen or whether you believe what you see with your own eyes. The establishment's response to this realignment tells you everything about what they fear. They're not really worried about Trump's social media or his personality. What they're terrified of is that millions of Americans have simply stopped believing everything they hear from American institutions. They're scared of people doing their own research, finding their own sources, thinking for themselves, asking questions. As my close friend would say, they're scared of people becoming critical thinkers. And look at the solutions. More censorship, more misinformation boards, more attempts to prosecute their political opponents. Every response like this validates the populist critique that the system is rigged, that different rules apply to you, that democracy is more theater than reality. Now, when Charlie died, when he was murdered, a lot of people thought they were ending a conversation. Instead, I think they started thousands of new ones. When they tried to bankrupt Trump with lawsuits, when they tried to put him in jail, they turned him into a martyr. When they censored misinformation that later turned out to be true, all they did was destroy their own credibility. Let me be honest about something that might not be popular in this room. Populism gets the diagnosis right, but the prescription is harder. Identifying corrupt institutions is easier than building better ones. Anger is a powerful fuel, but you cannot run a country on it for very long. Burn it all down is a great campaign slogan. It is a terrible governing philosophy. We need what I think I would call smart populism, or what the president would call common sense. Not just rage, but reform. Not just destruction, but construction. We need to know which institutions to fix and which to replace. We need to channel popular energy into lasting change, not just temporary satisfaction. This is what populists figured out in the early 1900s. They took populist anger and they turned it into something concrete. Real reforms, antitrust laws, direct democracy initiatives. The anger faded, but the reforms endured. In fact, many of them are still with us today. What would constructive populism look like today? First, I firmly believe that in many cases we need competition for failed institutions. Don't like the media that you're handed? Support independent journalists. Think universities are broken? Build new educational models. Believe that big tech censors too much? Create parallel platforms. We've seen all of these things happen in recent years. Substack and other independent platforms are revolutionizing journalism. Some of the best investigative journalism no longer flows from the corporate media. Alternative credentialing is challenging the traditional college monopoly. New social media platforms and new owners of some platforms are emerging faster than the old censors can keep up with. Second, I think we need to relocalize power. Washington cannot solve everything, nor should it try. But your city council is probably better able to fix your street. If it wanted to, your school board could fix your local school. And your sheriff could keep your community safe. Third, we have to rebuild social trust. Now, this does not happen through grand pronouncements. I can't order you to trust you and expect it to happen in this moment. But it happens through millions of small interactions where people realize that their neighbors, even the ones who vote differently, are decent folks just trying to make it through. We have a shared purpose as Americans, and we have a shared destiny on this continent. And we used to act like it. And the sooner we get back to it, the better off we'll be. To address universities specifically, you're caught in the middle of an interesting populist moment. It's not comfortable, I'm sure, for many university presidents. Universities at large face declining public trust. Many Americans see them as bastions of elite thinking, disconnected from regular people's concerns. The percentage of Americans with high confidence in higher education has dropped significantly. It's not immune from the crisis of trust in institutions in this country. It's no fault of ASU, though. This university is impressive, and the reforms here, the effort to grow this university, the effort to include regular people and the children of regular people, is an American model that I think, frankly, could be followed the country over. Universities remain essential for research, innovation, giving young people the tools to succeed. The answer is not to destroy them, it is to reform them, just like this university has done. And it's become a research hub that is the envy of many universities in the country. What would reform look like? Real viewpoint diversity, to which here there is a commitment, not just token conservatives. Protection for unpopular research, teaching students how to think and not necessarily what to think. Demonstrating value to taxpayers who fund public universities. Preparing students for careers, not just activism. Universities, I think, that embrace this mission will thrive. Those that resist may find themselves increasingly irrelevant and increasingly defunded. Universities cannot be incubators only for those who wish the destruction of the West. They must recommit to American exceptionalism. I think in the next 10, 20, and 30 years, the universities that are committed to the building of America instead of the destruction of the West are the ones that Americans are going to support. And those are the ones that are going to grow. Let me speak directly to the students in here for a moment. You're inheriting a weird situation in this country. Trust in institution is low, record lows. Political divisions, you're told, are unbridgeable. The economic ladder feels harder to climb. Seems like maybe your American dream will be less than what you think your parents had. But you also have advantages that no one else has ever had. Information is free. Starting a business is virtually free. You can build an audience of millions from your dorm room. The gatekeepers who controlled information in the past have lost their gates, and they've lost their keys. But the question that you should ask yourself is, what will I do with this unprecedented freedom? You can accept the narrative that some will serve you for political reasons, I might add, that America is irreparably broken, that it's rotten at its core and must be ripped out root and branch. Or you can be part of fixing it. You can retreat into ideological bubbles, which our technology makes all too easy. Or you can engage with people with whom you do not agree in a good faith civil dialogue. You can wait for institutions to reform themselves, or you can simply do it yourself. As we think about this populist moment, here are the questions that I think we could answer here tonight. How do we balance popular wisdom with genuine expertise? There is a role for both. Sometimes the people are right and the experts are wrong. Sometimes it's the reverse. How do we tell the difference? How do we reform institutions without destroying social stability? Change is necessary, but so is order. Revolution sounds romantic until you're living through one. How do we rebuild trust in a low-trust society? Democracy requires some basic level of social trust. What do I mean by that? Democracy requires that anyone in this room could stand up tonight and espouse a political opinion and fear not about walking out the door. Democracy requires that you go cast a ballot for whomever you think is best and fear not about any retribution for having done so. Without that, we have nothing. How do we prepare these students in the next generation for this landscape? I'm not sure the old civics textbooks quite capture this moment. Not sure they've captured our current reality. What should we be teaching in our universities and in our high schools, and maybe even lower than that? I think we're living through a hinge moment in American history. In many ways, the post-World War II consensus is dead. The post-Cold War order is crumbling to some extent. But something new is being born. We don't know yet what it looks like. Some people fear it. I do not. I don't look at this as a danger. I look at it as an opportunity. Now, we could let this moment descend into chaos and mutual destruction as we peer at each other over our fences around our ideological bubbles. Or we could channel this energy in this innate feeling that we must do something into American renewal. Messier than what came before, maybe. More contentious? Definitely. And we have to relearn as an American society how to disagree with each other without losing our minds. But this rebirth, this renewal, will be more honest, it will be more responsive to everyday citizens, and it will be truer to democratic ideals. I think the revolution that Charlie started with a folding table and a handmade sign isn't ending. It's accelerating. Every time someone questions authority, every time someone builds an alternative to a failing institution, every time someone chooses engagement over retreat, the revolution continues. Every time someone chooses words over weapons, we move closer to a more perfect union. I started tonight by talking about Charlie Kirk, and I'll end there. Charlie understood that democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires participants, not just observers. It needs people willing to have uncomfortable conversations. Sort of what my job description is at CNN. Requires people to challenge orthodoxies. It requires people who want to build rather than just tear down. But that's this generation's opportunity. Not to accept this populist moment uncritically, but to shape it. Not to destroy every institution, but to rescue the ones that are worth saving and to build better ones that can replace the rest. Not to retreat into cynicism, which I fear is rising in our culture, but to engage in the messy, sometimes frustrating, but essential work of self-government. The establishment said Trump couldn't win, and I was one of them. They said populism would burn out. They said Americans were too divided to find common ground. They said young people didn't care about any of these issues or care enough to vote. But they were wrong about all of it. The question before you now is, what do you plan to do about it? How will you channel the moment? What will you build on this foundation that the populist movement has laid for our country? I would just submit to you before we answer questions tonight that the stage is yours. The tools are available. The opportunity is at hand. What's your move? Thank you for having me. I am honored to be here at Arizona State University, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much. A lot of people have said I look better in low light.
Well, thank you for a fine talk, Scott. This was very good. Your comment about a hinge moment, we are in a hinge moment, that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
And also the point you made about what Donald Trump has done, and again, this isn't praise him, like him, criticize him, dislike him, but what he has done by building the Republican vote in key sectors. I think that adds to this. 2016 struck me and some other thoughtful commentators as the end of the post-Cold War era. So we are now, there was the post-Cold War era from 1989, 2000 through 2016. Not just Trump, but Brexit's another sign of this. And so that gets us back to the hinge.
Yeah.
Where is the hinge going to turn, do you think? We are, to use another phrase, you said AT, after Trump. Well, 2018 is going to be AT. What do you see as the next stages?
You know, regarding the post-Cold War era, and we are beyond it, but we're not out of it fully, and we're still operating, I think, within the bounds of the institutions that were created to win it. I mean, look what the president has done with NATO. I mean, after it was predicted he would destroy NATO, he's now convinced all the countries to go to 5% of GDP for their national defense. No other American president could get them to do it, even during the height of the post-Cold War era, post-World War II era. And so I actually don't think the institutions that were built after World War II or to win the Cold War are necessarily dead. I do think they're pivoting to a new future. And obviously, they're responding to something in the moment, which is the war in Ukraine. But the president's done something quite remarkable. All the experts who predicted NATO's destruction were wrong. And now Europe will do more, they'll spend more, and they'll be more responsible for their own security, which they were not after World War II than they've ever been before. That's a good thing. To answer your question about 2028, I actually recently interviewed the president, and I asked him a simple question. Who is the one person that you believe can hold all your coalition together when you're retiring? And he talked for about 3 minutes and didn't say one name. Because I think he knows he is a singular figure. I don't think it can be replicated. Whatever you call it, however you describe it, whatever it is, it is hard, near impossible to replicate. Now, that's not to say that there won't be people to carry on the movement. It would be shocking to me, absent a major thing we don't know, that J.D. Vance would not be the Republican nominee for president. But he's a different kind of person. He's a different personality. He has lots of different views on some issues than President Trump. It will be a different kind of leader for the party, but it won't be the same. You can't replicate it. For the Democrats, I think they're in a similar moment to where the Republicans were after 2012. Broken, demoralized, lost, wondering, what have we been doing here? Why are we losing? In our case, in 2012 to Obama, in their case, to Trump. And when institutions or political parties get in that headspace and they are that weak, I mean, today, the Democratic Party approval rating or image is 20 to 30%. Based on what poll you look at, no matter which poll, it's historically low. When you're that weak and that disliked, the door is open for someone you've not thought of to walk in, take over, and reform it. That is precisely what Trump did in 2016. The Democrats may be in the same place as they head to 2028. It will depend on what lessons they learn from having lost in 2024 and whatever happens in 2026. But Trump is singular. Hard to replicate. Many will try, but that would be folly to try to replicate or emulate. There's no authenticity in that. There's one thing we've learned from the president is that authenticity is the coin of the realm. People who can speak, no one ever accused Donald Trump of not telling us what's on his mind. That's what they want. They want you to be able to do it without some consultant having handed you a sheet of paper. The era of scripted puppets in politics is over. The era of scripted puppets in media is over. The people who can embrace and practice authenticity will succeed. The people who are only capable of reading a script will fail.
Well, I think that reinforces an impression I had in not just 2016, but in 2015, when Donald Trump took the golden staircase down Trump Tower. Many people, myself included, thought, is this serious? Is this going to go anywhere? And then it did have legs. And it's fascinating to see how that unexpected moment turned out. We we have a microphone set up, and so I would encourage members of our audience with questions to please line up behind the microphone. If you have a question, we welcome you asking it. Please step forward. Share your question for Scott Jennings. If you have a speech, don't give it. But please join us in a lively conversation continuing. We can hear you.
Forgive us our squinting. We can hear you, but we can't see you. Yeah, although with the Tea Party, it's an interesting proposition, but that was a small government movement. I view populism as a larger government or a more muscular government movement. I mean, Trump, Vance, and his version of populism are not shy about using government power to achieve outcomes. I think the Tea Party guys were more hesitant about that. They wanted to spend less, they wanted less bureaucracy, they wanted a smaller government. And in some cases, Trump and his movement does as well. But in some cases, they're quite happy to spend and to use government power in order to achieve outcomes that they think are necessary. It's an interesting question. Whether it has to reinvent itself or not, I don't know. What I would say, though, is just to point you to my remarks, and that is to say that instead of reinventing itself, I would just say that it has to move into an era of reform. It has, the energy that delivered you needs to be channeled into reforming the institutions that the American people have handed you. And I think they're actually in the process of doing it in some cases. Trump's mere presence in office has reformed our immigration situation. Trump's muscular jockeying with the media has in some cases led to some media reforms. His jostling with universities, I think, has led some to admit the rampant anti-Semitism that was going on, particularly in the Ivies. And so I do think that some of the reforms that come from this energy are occurring. The State Department, Marco Rubio, I think, has undertaken the largest federal bureaucratic reform maybe in a generation or more by revolutionizing and reforming Foggy Bottom. So I actually think within his movement there are people who understand the need to go from energy aimed at votes to energy aimed at reforming. But the question is, do the results of the reform please the American people? And we, of course, get a report card on this every 2 years, and we'll get one next year. And so I think the verdict is still out on it, but I do think there's evidence that it's not reinventing itself necessarily, but it is reforming itself in a way that they would argue is, in fact, more responsive to the American people than perhaps the institutional elites had been willing to be in the past. But great question and good comparison.
Thanks.
Yes, sir. Hi.
Hello, thank you for your lecture. It was wonderful.
Thank you.
My question is, oftentimes populist leaders are popularized and fueled by passion and the us against them sort of mentality that tends to remain throughout and ostracizes those in the middle. How is that populist passion, or how could that populist passion begin as such and actually bring people together in the end and maybe provide a way for social cohesion in the future?
Yeah, great question. I actually think most Americans, center left to center right, live between the 20-yard lines. Some lived outside of it, but there's a broad middle of the country, center left to center right, and not everybody is hyper political. You have feelings about certain issues, and maybe there are some issues where you're left leaning and some where you're right leaning. And I think within those bounds, most people would say, I just kind of want them to work together and achieve a common sense outcome. Now, most people would say that. And I think that we are on the brink of possibly feeling that cohesion more than we know. I think we're constantly told that we're divided. but I'm not sure that's true on a lot of issues. Most people want certain things to be solved. They may have a little differing idea about how to solve it, but the destination is shared. I'll also tell you one other thing. I think America's 250th birthday is a chance for us to renew our patriotism in this country. And we may not rally around each other's political ideas, but why couldn't we rally around this country on its 250th birthday? We all love America. We all believe that America is an improving commodity, and we all believe we have a role to play in it. I think this moment, and I think Trump actually gets it, I've talked to him about it. I think this moment when you're having a milestone date like this, July 4th next summer, is a chance for us to all ask ourselves, wait, why are we fighting with each other all the time? We live in the greatest country ever devised. And we have a shared purpose. It's to continue this nation as an improving commodity. And so I actually kind of hope that we don't squander this moment, that we all look at this and say, hey, America's pretty darn good. And we have a lot to be thankful for, and we have a lot to fight for, and we have a lot to protect. And there's a lot of countries and a lot of Western democracies all over this world who I think are currently crumbling, or they've allowed themselves to be overrun, and there's a political fecklessness in them. I don't sense that in America. I think we inherently know we're the last best hope for the West. And this moment, next summer, is a reminder of why we are who we are. And we don't always have to agree to believe that we're all in this together in some way, and that we're all neighbors, and that the better you do, the better I do. And I think the president gets it. I think a lot of Americans get it, and I really hope that each of us individually take the chance to reflect upon that. This is an important moment. 250 years of America. It's a good thing, not a bad thing. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Test.
Hey.
First, thank you so much for coming and spending your time. Yeah. So first, thank you so much for coming and spending time with us here at
Yep.
Arizona State University and the Tempe community overall. I think we all really appreciate that time. So my question has to do with kind of the flow of information and that access for information that you talked about with Gen Z. So in the 90s, you had a guy named Tim Berners-Lee that created the World Wide Web, and it completely changed the way that we access information. And recently in 2022, 2023, we saw a new technology come through with all the AI tools and the AI agents, chatbots. So I was wondering if you could speak to some of the ways at the Run Switch PR firm, CNN overall, and even in our educational institutions, how you think AI is going to adapt those different medias of communication, since media is the number one way that that information is flowed and accessed. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. Actually, I'm not an expert on this, but I did just spend 2 days with a bunch of people from Google explaining AI, their AI technology to me, so I'm slightly more educated on it now than I was 48 hours ago. During this time, I also met Martha Stewart, which was amazing. It was a strange thing. There was a party. I was there. Martha Stewart was there. LL Cool J was there. The actor Kyle MacLachlan was there. And the German who runs all of Google's quantum computing was there. It was a strange gathering. At any rate, here's what I learned. This is evolving rapidly, and it is getting smarter exponentially. We are in a race against China to see who's going to control the rules and the infrastructure, and that we don't currently make enough energy to win the war. This is what was on the mind of the thinkers there. I think we already see the power of it. I mean, a lot of industries are being shaped by it. I talked to the head of their AI division, and there's a lot of concern that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs in short order to AI. He disagreed. He said in the next few years, he thought the people who would succeed here are going to be the people who learn how to use AI. And so the race won't be us against AI. We'll be racing each other to see who can use it and implement it better. It's like any other tool. Long run, maybe. But the short run is, are we creative enough to figure out how to use it to make our education system better, to make our jobs easier, to make ourselves more creative? I think there's emerging evidence that we are. I am extremely worried about all of this in the framework of our race against China. Make no mistake, they are not our friends in this endeavor, nor in most others. And I think we have to have a commitment as an American people, as a government, as a tech industry, that we are going to lock arms and win this. Part of that is we're going to have to build more energy production. We need more electrons. It's likely going to come from nuclear. So very, very early on in this conversation, in order to finish having it, we have to actually have a plan to win the war. I think this administration has put a solid plan on the table. I think most tech leaders agree with that. But we have to have a commitment to do it. Regarding information flow, the news business is contracting. There's probably a temptation to overuse AI. Although I will tell you at CNN, we do have some internal prohibitions against using it for certain reasons, for certain on-air purposes, which I think is probably a good thing right now. But there's no doubt it is a huge leap forward in research ability. I mean, I can do the research of several people by myself with just one computer. And in a contracting industry, that's a good thing. It might make us smarter. Sometimes it makes you dumber. I don't know if you've used it very often, but about 10% of the time, it can make you look really stupid. But 90% of the time, it might make you look pretty smart. So I don't know if I have a definitive answer for you other than to say I understand the power. And then the emerging technology beyond that, quantum computing. The guy who runs it told me that they have a chip that can do something in 5 minutes that would take a regular learning machine 10,000 years. Think about that. So we're on the brink of a complete changeover in how we think about computing in this world and what it can do for us. But I actually do think there are geopolitical implications, the future of warfare, the future of economic modeling. All of this is wrapped up in AI. To lose it to China would be a disaster. So I think this is the new space race. And we're either going to win it or we're going to lose it. But I have some belief that we're Americans, so we'll find a way to win it. It's a good question. I'm sure you all are wrestling with it here in your academic pursuits every day. I'm sure there's a lot of temptations that go along with it. My advice is to resist the urge. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much,
Yeah.
Scott.
This new space race, the AI race, that seems likely to create an awful lot of shocks.
Yeah.
And I could see Americans being Americans, success in the long term and many advantages. But how are the shocks going to be felt given what you've described and given the current state in the country?
Well, I think in some industries you could see some short-term. I mean, I've had accountants tell me, the days of a room full of people sitting around with green visors crunching your taxes will probably come to an end pretty soon. There might be a lot of entry-level lawyers that don't exist anymore. They're going to be replaced by AI technology that can do basic legal stuff. I mean, there could be some industries that have short-term impacts. But it seems to me that the emerging view is that we're only bound by our creativity and what we can think of to do with it. That's as a commercial matter. As a national security matter, I mean, the use of it in the future of national defense and warfare is probably vast and beyond what most of us could comprehend in here. So that'll shape the kinds of people that we need in the military to run it, to program it, to understand it. So I think the shocks are going to be in, if you were endeavoring to be in some profession, but all of a sudden you find yourself with a talent for creatively using AI, you could find yourself sucked into something you didn't even imagine before. But I want the people controlling that and giving you those pathways to be American companies, not the Chinese Communist Party.
Question.
Scott, thank you for taking the time. I was just curious, given today's date, if you would talk about the pin you seem to always be wearing and what it means to you.
Yeah. I've worn this pin every night on CNN since October the 7th. In my opinion, it is the central front in the fight for the future of Western civilization. We cannot permit a situation where these barbarians believe that they obtained a positive outcome from conducting the operations of October the 7th. Cannot be permitted. They have to view this as the worst idea they ever had. I don't know where it's going to end. I'm hopeful that this deal that's floating around gets us there. I've prayed every single day for these hostages. I went to Israel this summer. I visited the Gaza border. I went to the Nero's kibbutz, one of the farming communities that was invaded. I think on October the 6th, they had 440 people living there. And on October the 8th, they had about 200. It's where the Bibas family lived. You remember those little babies that were paraded through the streets with throngs of cheering people cheering their remains? I went to the Nova Music Festival and talked to some people who lived through that horror. I don't think we've been told the truth in the West about everything that was done to those kids that day. And I'll say something that's going to be very difficult for you all to hear. Those kids were treated like animals. They were not just murdered or taken hostage. They were raped. They were brutalized. They took women into buildings with 35 men, raping them one after the other and making their boyfriends watch. And at the conclusion of it, mutilating their genitals, mutilating the genitals of their boyfriends, and then maybe murdering them, maybe not. It is the most horrific thing you could possibly imagine to do to another human being. They did not treat them like humans. So it is hard for me to imagine a world where you're living side by side with somebody who just 2 years ago marched across the field and raped your kids, kidnapped you, took you hostage, and so on and so forth. So this has touched me in a way that very few other issues have. For the Israelis, the order of magnitude of the people that they lost, if you try to compare it to 9/11, we lost 3,000 plus people that day. It would be like 65,000 for them. I mean, you do the math on it. This touched every Israeli. They want it to end, but they want their people back. Now, I was in Israel when the war against Iran started. I was stuck there. I was on the shore of the Sea of Galilee the night it started. The Israeli jets were going this way and the Iranian missiles were going that way, and I was standing underneath all of it. I've never lived through anything like that. But if there's a silver lining to any of this, it's that they've cut the head off of the terror octopus in the Middle East. Iran is exposed. Hezbollah is defeated. Hamas is on the brink. And we may be on the cusp of a safer Middle East than we've ever had. But we cannot have it until these hostages come back. And the fact that not one of them has walked out since the president announced his deal makes me extremely nervous. But I met with the families, I met with the victims, and I will never, ever, ever forget for as long as I live what they told me they lived through. And I think to forget about it or to wave it away is wrong. The future of the West is in whether we permit the barbarians to believe that they won. They cannot believe it. So thank you for your question. It's a tough day for those of us who support the Jewish people. I'll also just tell you, I think this whole thing has unleashed the biggest rise in anti-Semitism in this world since World War II, since the Nazis. It's happening on college campuses. It's happening all over the world. It's happening on cities. And it's so easy how quickly we can fall into it. And we just have to be united as Americans and saying we're not going to permit this. We had people burning little old Jewish ladies alive in Colorado. We had a person that tried to burn down the Pennsylvania governor's mansion with the Jewish governor and his family sleeping inside. And some of these people have gone from burning American flags to burning actual Americans. That also cannot be permitted. So I wear this because I want people who turn on their televisions to know that there's at least one person who can tell the difference between right and wrong. Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
One of the remarkable things as the aftermath, and your very passionate response to the question brings this to mind, is how many people have picked up the Palestinian cause as their own, who are not Palestinian, how this has become a cause célèbre on college campuses. We saw the encampments at many campuses the other year, and what made this such a cause to people?
Well, I do think underlying the cause is just a deep and abiding anti-Semitism. It's always right under the surface. I think we have to just admit it and acknowledge it. That's number one. Number two, I think for a lot of people who've picked up this cause, it was the latest of the causes. But underlying all of the causes is the idea that we live in a world with two kinds of people, oppressors and oppressed. And they viewed the Israelis, the Jewish people, as the oppressors, and the Palestinians as the oppressed. They have the same view in the United States. And so if you view the world through that lens, then you can start to justify a lot of actions to change it. In this case, you'd be justifying or rationalizing or washing away what happened on October the 7th. You know, they had it coming. They're the oppressors. And I think a lot of people have taken up that cause without really thinking through or understanding the terror that was visited upon the Israelis, or thinking through what would happen if they themselves stepped foot in Gaza. I mean, I'm sorry, but the Queers for Palestine signs that I see, I have to chuckle at, because if any of them carried one into Gaza, they'd be chucked off the top of a building. So I think there's frankly a lot of ignorance about what happened. I think we've lived through something of a propaganda campaign, to be honest. I'm not indifferent to the human suffering that has occurred in both populations, but I don't think we've been told the full truth in the West about how October the 7th was conducted, why it was conducted, and I think a lot of people have frankly fallen for it. And so I wear this pin because I feel like we've over-indexed this viewpoint on cable television. And we don't get to debate it every day. But in my heart, I think we should be, because I'm not sure there's anything more important going on in the world than making sure these terrorists understand this was a terrible idea. We should not do this ever again. If they don't exit this with that belief, it will happen again and again and again, and we cannot permit that.
What you let happen will continue to happen until you stop letting it happen.
Yeah.
Please, question.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
So after the assassination of Charlie Kirk on campus, I spoke to many students, and many of them were happy about what had happened. And so I think there's a growing concern we have over the radicalization of young people on the left and right, particularly in regards to anti-Semitism, violence, and there's growing concerns and questions over how that's going to be used in political and policy messaging in 26 and 28 and going forward for our country. I think you've done a great job kind of exemplifying the proper response to that. But I'm curious on what you're seeing or how you think the left and right are going to adapt their policies as we have more young people coming in.
Yeah, I share your disgust with some of the response. I mean, I frankly couldn't believe it. At my alma mater, the University of Louisville, that very day, some of the most heinous posters I've ever seen were posted about Charlie. I teach a seminar at Georgetown University. There have been posters at that university that say, "Hey, fascists, catch. Come meet our club. We're gonna gather up and celebrate this." Pretty bad. We've seen people lose their minds celebrating this. I think it's actually shocked a lot of people, the volume of it. The question is, what happens when the next person in politics at a position of responsibility also has that attitude? We didn't have to wait long. It's happening in Virginia right now. The Democratic candidate for Attorney General sent text messages wishing that his Republican colleague, the Speaker of the Virginia House, get 2 bullets, and wishing that his wife would have to see their children die. It's there. You can read it. And what has the response been? Any condemnation from the left? No. No calls to drop out. No, hey, this is not a good thing for a state's top law enforcement officer to believe, particularly in this moment. The answers have all been, well, I don't like it, but. And in politics, you can ignore everything before the but. So we didn't have to wait long to find out how it was going to be used or how people were going to react to it. And it's pretty troubling. So I also think that the polling is pretty clear. There is a chunk of our society, and it's young people on the left, who believe the time for speech and debate is over and the time for violence is now. I was in New York City the other day and watched a pep rally for Luigi Mangione. Pep rally outside the courthouse. There is an element of our society that has concluded that this experiment has failed and that it will only be replaced through some sort of violent revolution against the political elites, the corporate CEOs, whoever you believe are your oppressors, the Jews, whoever. And I think it's larger than we know. And we're going to defeat it because we're going to overwhelm it with our speech. But it's going to be ugly for a while, I'm afraid. We're already seeing it. So I share your disgust. I also think there's something about Charlie that I think for political analysts, we've been analyzing it through the lens of, well, political violence or what are the political impacts of this. But I actually think some of the hate for Charlie is not born of his politics, but born of his faith. And I do think there's a movement in this world to try to tamp down people who loudly proclaim their faith, particularly if they're Christians or Jews. And as much as he was a political operative, he was someone who proclaimed his faith as loudly as he proclaimed his politics. I don't think we can lose sight of that. There may be a war over politics, but there's also a war over the role of faith in our culture. So that worries me as well. So it's tumultuous and it's a little worrisome, but we cannot shrink. The clear path forward is to speak more. We cannot let these people drive us all into our homes and close the blinds and lock the doors, come out in 10 years. We will not like what we see. Thank you for your question.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Thank you very much for being here tonight and spending your time talking for us. It is truly an honor to have you here. And as someone who's recently started watching your debates, it got me particularly interested and excited.
Yeah.
I'm really happy that you.
Thank you.
My question is in regards to this American revitalization, this American renewal that you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What are some practical words of wisdom for engaging in civic dialogue? People that maybe aren't so interested in that type of thing. People who tend to shut that out, or maybe even just people who don't really pay attention to this.
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, the truth is there'll be some people who just don't want to talk to you. I mean, I meet a lot of people in my job, and I think I'm the only Republican they know. And they wouldn't even know me if they weren't contractually obligated to do so. So the truth is, you may run into people in your life that just don't want to hear it. But my bet is you'll run into a lot that do. And what I try to do is, I always say there's a good rule for debating and punditry. You have to open your ears and your heart before you open your mouth. And if you can signal that to another person, I think you'll find a lot smoother conversation. I also think as conservatives, I think it is imperative that we debate with good faith, good nature, and good humor. Where I come from in Kentucky, they always say you catch more flies with honey. And I think it's true. And so in my debates, and look, I'm not perfect, and I sometimes get a little bent out of shape, but in my debates, I try to remain calm and be of good humor. And I just think we'll win more people over that way. But I also try to signal to people that, hey, I may not agree with you, and maybe I don't even agree with the premise of your statements, and maybe I think you're silly for not having prepared better for this conversation. But I do not doubt your patriotism and your love of this country and your belief that it could be better and we have a shared purpose. And so, to me, when you're a conservative and you're engaged in these kinds of things, I think signaling your heart to people right up front is imperative. And so, I would never approach a conversation angry. I would never approach a conversation smugly. I would never approach a conversation condescendingly. I would just approach all my conversations humbly. And I think you'll find that's the best way to do it. Good question.
Hello, sir. Thank you for speaking with us tonight. We greatly appreciate you being here.
Thank
My question is about something that you discussed not only in your answers to people who have come up to this mic, but also in your discussion that you just had, your speech that you shared with us tonight. My question is about actual concrete policy reform. So we talked about building upon the foundation of the populist movement, and
Yeah.
that the responsibility for us as American citizens now is to build something, not just talk about something, upon that foundation. What are some policy reforms that you see that the government, either federally or locally, close to us or far away from us, could institute today, tomorrow, or the day after that could have real, tangible, positive impact on the country? Just what are some reforms that you see would be good to start doing right now?
I think across the board, the desire of the American people who have lost faith in institutions is just for a little more transparency. I think one of the things that we believed in COVID was that we were being told the truth, and we didn't have any reason to necessarily doubt it, and so we all did it. And then we, short order, found out that it wasn't really based on sound information, and then we were told to shut up and do it anyway. And then we started to ask ourselves, well, how did you arrive at these conclusions? And it took a long time and a lot of effort to try to find that out. That's one example. But I think you look through all of our institutions of government. Take the job data that we get every month. We get the data, and then 3 months later, we get the new data. And then we get the new data, and we get the new data. And I think it's reasonable to ask, where is the transparency in this? Why do we keep revising this? Are we doing the best practices here? Education. Get the test scores every year. They get worse and worse. But there's not a lot of transparency about what education bureaucracies intend to do about it. And so, you could probably write individual laws to try to change the direction of any individual policy, whether it's taxes or education or the health regime. But to me, the underpinning of it all is that you have to be, as an American, able to look under the hood whenever you want. And you cannot be told to shut up when you ask to do so. And I think that what institutions had done over the years was intentionally make themselves opaque so that you would not feel like you even had the capacity to question it. That's over. So if I had one concrete reform that I would recommend, it's that there needs to be a transparency mechanism in all government that would permit, whether it's our representatives or ourselves directly, to get any answer we want at any moment and not have to work so darn hard to get it. And I think when you start to increase transparency and you start to show a little humility about the things you got right and wrong, trust will skyrocket. The American people are forgiving. If they would say to you, here's how we arrived at this conclusion, and here's how we missed it, you would be far more likely to trust it the next time than you're going to be. But if they tell you, well, you're dumb for even asking, you will never trust it again. And so some of these institutions and government bureaucracies, I think, are very defensive. They needn't be. It's okay to let people look inside and to be honest about what we got right and wrong. We're all humans. We're going to make mistakes. But whether we own it and allow people to examine it is a different story. And so I actually do think that we just haven't gone far enough on that front yet. And I think a lot of the populism that we're experiencing is mostly because people feel like we got it wrong, and now they won't even answer questions about it, and no one's ever held accountable for it. So to me, transparency and accountability mechanisms, no matter what area you're talking about, are reforms that I would work on immediately. I would start with the public health regime, I would move on to the education regime, and I would go from there.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Well, Scott, thank you very much for a lively conversation and for a fine talk. And I'd like to thank our events team and our sound and audiovisual team for all their good work. And I thank our audience for coming out on a sunny afternoon to hear this event. So thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Really good. Thank you very much.